Hey everyone, the fourth week of the LCS is here, and it's time for the third episode of Know Your Role, this time with Scarra, who's going to talk to us all about mid laner. You can check about the VODs, the archives for the old ones. First off, let's talk about mid lane. What is popular right now? It feels to me like mid lane is where you have this huge, diverse pool of champions that you can use.
I think Season 3 really let there be a lot more champion versatility in all the lanes, mid lane being probably the one that had the most variability. I don't know how to even say it. Like the most diverse champion pool pre-patch. And now that we're into Season 3, it's still got, you can pretty much pick anything you want there as long as you have the counter pick or as long as you can kind of deal with certain champions and work around them.
So what are some of the most popular ones we're seeing right now?
Right now, you see the very popular Orianna, Lux. I think are probably the two most popular. You go into Rise, and you wrap her up with TF. I think those are the most popular in all the regions. Occasionally, you'll see stuff like Kha'Zix. You'll go to 2 games of Xerath this week. You'll see Nidalee middle. You'll see Cat middle by PK. You'll see Cassidy middle by Ocelot. So there's a lot of people who are known for a lot of different champions.
Well, talk to me, is there a lot of counter picking that goes on mid lane? Is it more so than other lanes? I know top lane used to sort of be like that.
It's just about as much. There's just about as much counter picking now as there was in Season 2. And even for top and mid lane, the counter pick potential is about the same. For top lane, since the lane's a little bit longer, you have a little bit more of a way to exploit the fact that it's a bad matchup. You can harass them for a little bit longer than you could in mid lane, because mid lane's like the shortest lane in the game. So it's a little bit. I would say there's just equal amounts of counter pick potential throughout the map. I think bottom lane has the lowest chance to get counter picked, which is why commonly you'll see it get picked first.
So Season 3, of course, introduced a lot of new items. And now we're in the fourth week of the LCS where people are really being able to sort of decide what is good and what isn't. Is there sort of a standard thing, or is it more based around the champions for what people are building?
It's more based around the champion, the situations. You're seeing a lot of the Grail now because Grail literally just got buffed this patch. So with 5% more CDR, it's become very cost efficient as a CDR item. Another item you see a lot is Morellonomicon, which is one of the 2 cost efficient CDR items in the game for APs. You're also seeing a lot of, obviously a lot of Death Cap, your in-game item build, a lot of Void Staff. Haunted Guys, you're seeing Leandries now that works correctly. Oh, not correctly, it's buffed for AoE abilities. So you see kind of all the items, like all the same items you'd see before, but you have a little bit more build diversity for different situations, which is good, like a good thing.
Whenever I did this episode previously, I talked about some of the stronger champions in the lane. Do you think that there are any right now that are OP, or is it sort of a pretty balanced mid lane?
I think right now the best mid lane champion in the game is TF. Bar nothing. He's got everything you'd ever want. He's got global pressure, wave clear, long range harass, CC. He's pretty much your all-in-one. He doesn't have mobility, so that's his one weakness. Is that there's counter picks available for him, but he's got just so much as a complete package that he's probably the best mid in the game right now. I could safely say that he is first picked, first banned in all the Asian regions, and against any European or NA team that can play the champion, it's a huge threat. Aside from that, there's oscillating amounts of strength between the remaining champions. Rise is still extremely solid, very strong. Kale still considered to be one of the best champions in the game middle. I certainly think she's one of the best champions in the game. And then Lux, Orianna are just very safe picks.
So one of the questions I asked before was, if you were a game balance designer on the live team at Riot, and you had the opportunity to address any champions that you feel are overpowered right now, would you pick any, and what would you do? So maybe in the case of TF, who you just said is probably the strongest, do you feel like he needs to be addressed in any way, or any changes need to be made to him? Or are you pretty content with, the strength of all of them right now?
I think for TF, there needs to be... It's really hard to say. TF is a hard champion to play. And that's the only way that he's kind of somewhat balanced, is that he's an extremely hard champion to play, but if mastered, is the most problematic mid lane champion. So maybe just extending the cooldown on his ulti would just be perfect, because then there's more counterplay options there, because he has to choose very specific times to be able to use it. And that's what they did with Karthus ulti, and that's what made them go from a really super strong champion to a somewhat balanced champion. So maybe that's all they need.
You know, we also talked about champions that have come out recently and where they all are at. I mean, Diana comes to mind. I know that that was about 6 months ago, but within the past, 6 months or whatever, are there any champions that are in mid lane that you're really a fan of, or is it? I know you've played Diana, so I know you're interested in her. What do you think about some of the more recent mids?
I think Diana is by far my favorite mid. Like it's shown like I put in more time on Diana than any other champion. Gragas also like one of I don't understand the champion itself confuses me and I play it. I feel like he has bad matchups, but I feel like the bad matchups can turn into good matchups off like one misplay or one like just being able to outplay your opponent. And so he's very interesting. He's a very strange champion, and he's got a lot of tools at his disposal. And he does very specific things against like attack speed debuffs against that are very, very, very nice. Another champion that's very weird to come in mid is like Wukong. Wukong, like AD carries, Wukong and Kha'Zix have shown up, and Zed all of a sudden have shown up a lot in Asia. Zed has been used a lot to counter TFs now, and those three mids are like very, very, very. They're interesting in its own way. Like Zed is a very potent assassin, as with Kha'Zix has a very strong reset potential, and Wukong itself is one of the deadliest AD like AOE team fight champions in the game. Like he does insane damage with literally one item, and you can just build a full tank after that. So each of these champions have like a niche that they fill and can be used to counterpick or pick correctly against certain teams. So I feel like the game has gone strategically. There's more depth now in Season 3. I feel like there's still some problems to iron out. Definitely some balance issues with some champions, with some items, stuff like that. But I feel like overall the game has changed for the better because there's better champion diversity now. And there's just... It feels like the game is harder to play, at least from like a cerebral aspect.
So getting back to some of the more recent champions, would you say that it's Diana and maybe Kha'Zix and Zed that are really strong in the mid lane right now, or are there any others that spring to mind?
Every champion is strong middle. Like there's certain champions that do different things. Like the three champions I named are just the threes that came to my head first because I play two of the champions and the other champions I've just seen around a lot, right? Then they don't necessarily mean that those are the champions that are showing up currently, or just the champions that are like the best in mid. Like I said before, mid lane has a lot of pick and counter pick potential. So pretty much any champion that you can think about running mid will work middle.
So let's discuss champions that you really like, that you would want to run mid, but just don't seem that viable right now. Maybe Heimerdinger. You're a huge fan of the Heimerdinger, or are there any just that are really fun to you as a player, but you just can't pull them out because you feel as though they're too easily countered or whatever? And then if so, what changes would you like to see to bring them up to viability?
I think Karma is really bad middle. Oh, yeah? I think she's workable middle. Like she has like ways that you can play with her shield in like certain like low range comps, but I feel like she's scales very poorly, bad AP ratio, stuff like that. I know she's getting reworked, but it had the AP ratios of her abilities gone up by like 0.1 on two different abilities, she'd automatically be like a good champion. It's just that she's got like what 0.6 scaling on her shield and like 0.5 on her like Q. Like it's really bad. Her highest scaling ability is actually her W at like a 0.8, and that's like the most surprising thing because most people don't realize that it scales the best, and it's just like a random like line. So like she could be a lot better.
Is that what you would do if you were in charge of changing her? Would you just go ahead and tweak those coefficients a little bit, and that would put her in a good place? Or do you feel like any of her abilities need just to be changed to make her more viable?
I think she just needs some quality of life changes. Maybe like a range buff on like one of her abilities, and maybe just like her leash range on her W could be a little bit longer. Her leash break range, and then you have like a solid champion. Like I honestly think she's workable now. It's just you need her in like a low range comp, which is not ideal a lot of times, especially with Lux and like Orianna and all these like long range champions getting picked a lot. So like she could be good. She could be really good. If she had solid late game scaling, she could be like a very potent champion.
Before I wrap up the interview by asking about items, I just want to talk about that because you mentioned this long range thing that we're having. Is that just sort of what's happening in the meta? We're going to see a lot of Lux and Xerath and just mids that can snipe from really far away, or Orianna, etc.
It's kind of just like a moving like change. It's like, okay, well, right now mid lane has turned into farm lanes. Most of the people play like what Ryze, Orianna, Lux, and eventually like it's like, okay, well, if people are just gonna farm in mid lane, I'm gonna need stuff that's able to be cause consistent pressure from far range because they can cause consistent pressure from far range. So everyone goes into this farm mentality, and then like you'll eventually start seeing the rise of champions that counter these. For instance, like if there was a single good Cassidy player in North America that wasn't one in solo queue, you'd see a lot of him being picked against like Nidalee, against like for instance, Complexity tried picking Cassidy against our Nidalee, and they could have we 1v2'd it middle because it's very bad for me to be able to play Nidalee into Cassidy. I will not come out ahead. Right. But had they had like a Lee Sin jungle, they would have been able to pull off the 1v2 middle as Cassidy. Fine. It's just that we actually they didn't pick correctly when they picked the Cassidy pick, but the idea of the actual matchup was correct. And so eventually you'll see the counters to those specific champions start becoming more popular. Like I already played someone, like I played Diana Gragas, gap closing assassin. Nation champions do really well against these long range champions without much peel and without much mobility.
All right, let's wrap it up with items. I know you already mentioned that it's really dependent on the champion what items you're grabbing right now, but are there any that you're just a huge fan of, maybe that you think are underrated? Or are there any that you feel are too strong or too annoying? What are your general thoughts on the items that are available for mid lane champions right now?
I think Morel Nomicon is really good. Like I used to bash that item, and then I don't really know why. I looked at the gold efficiency of the item. I was like, wow, this item is like legit. Grail I bashed as well, but then it got buffed, so it's like actually like good. 20 like a 5% CDR buff is huge amount. That's like easily like a 400 cost like upgrade for free. And so those two items, CDR items, are becoming very, very popular. I think a lot of the most underrated item in middle actually is the Codex. Fiendish Codex that builds into both the items that I stated. It's 10% 30 AP for like 820 gold. It is a legit strategy to just stay on the Codex and finish off your core build and then go back to finish that off. And honestly, I feel like it's a strategy that not a lot of people employ correctly or at all.
All right, so it's the end of the interview. It's at that time for you to talk about any shout-outs or plugs that you might have.
Just like shout out to our fans. Like I'm glad there's still some left after that first week. And obviously we're performing very well, so we're hoping to have a consistent standard throughout the rest of this LCS season. Shout out to our sponsors like Alienware and Tech Intel, as well as our other sponsors. They've helped us out in bad times. I know. And of course, shout out to our organization team, Dignitas. Like they backed us for a while, even after we lost. And finally, like a lot of thanks to our team, like my team in general. Like I know I get a lot of credit for winning games, which is I feel like is actually like it's so bad because my teammates play so well in every game that we win, and for some reason I get credit for a lot of what they do. So it's like they deserve way more credit than me, especially for like today's game. Like I didn't do anything today, and for some reason I'm still getting credit for it. I'm just like, what? I did absolutely nothing. No, it's like they deserve a lot more credit than they get. And I really hope people see that my teammates are really the people who carry me most of the time.
Well, speaking of thanks, Scarra, I want to thank you very much for the interview. I know that you are always one of the first people to volunteer to do interviews with me, and I just want to say thank you so much for being that kind, that good friend that you are.
No problem, Travis. I know a lot of your interview time is taken, so it's very hard for you to fit me into your heavy esports schedule. Yeah. But I'm glad you're able to find a little bit of time for this interview today.
No, I am too, because it's always one of my favorite things is sitting down with my good friend Scarra. I know the community always asks for interviews with you, and you're always so gracious in volunteering your time with me. Thank you so much. For everyone, this is Travis on the 4th week of the LCS for the 3rd edition of Know Your Role. This time it was mid lane with my good friend Scarra here. Thank you very much for watching. You can check out the rest of our coverage at gamespot.com/LCS.